Welcome to the Let's Talk About Church Safety and Security podcast, where we discuss the issues churches face protecting their flock while maintaining a Christ-centered focus, with your host, Paul Buckner. Hey, sheepdogs. So this is a very important episode to me. I think it takes a different tact, maybe a different approach to things than we oftentimes look at things. So for those who don't know, my name is Paul Buckner. I'm a civilian police chaplain in the American Midwest. So I work with a lot of different law enforcement departments as a chaplain, as a civilian chaplain. I do a podcast called Beside the Badge, and I do the podcast that you're watching, Let's Talk Church Safety and Security. And I've been in the church safety space a long time now, about 13 years, something like that. And I've run teams, I've started teams, I've helped churches with teams, and I'm an eternal student. So as my friend Dan Blevins says, you're never going to hear me say that I've arrived. I'm always going to be learning. And that's kind of where this particular episode is going. So I'm talking about the Dunning Kruger effect, and it's basically pride. Let's call it what it is. And so if you stumbled across this video and you're looking for an academic video, this is more application than academic. And so there are plenty of videos out there. A lot of them all tell the same story about a guy robbing a bank. If you've never heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, go watch videos on YouTube. And an alarming amount of them all talk about the same guy. And I'm not going to waste your time here with that, but Dunning-Kruger, Dunning-Kruger, Dunning-Kruger effect or syndrome. Basically, it's where you don't know what you don't know. Just to paraphrase it, it's you assume you're better at something than you are because you don't know that you aren't. And we have a term for that. It's called pride. It's called not being humble. So we can have a bias about something, and we can assume. A lot of people assume, sitting at home, that they could make a half-court free throw shot in a basketball game, or they could throw a touchdown pass with no experience. And how many times do we see, let's just talk about this in life, how many times do we see people armchair quarterback situations on the football field, in any kind of sporting event, in politics? Well, the thing that we need to do is we need to do this. And what they don't know is the law. What they don't know is you're limited because of this. We had a situation in my area recently where a lot of people became very upset because they felt like our county commissioners were not handling the money correctly. And what they didn't know was there are state laws that actually impact how they use money. And so we literally don't know what we don't know. Well, that's ridiculous and that law is stupid. Okay, then fix it. Then get a hold of your state senators and your state representatives and get the law amended. They are there to take care of us. That's what they're supposed to be there for. But we can find ourselves in those situations, or people will look at a situation. Think about how many times have you seen this with a police shooting? They will look at a situation and they could have done it better, but they don't want to. That's why they don't have a badge. Or they could have done it better and they've never been in that situation. I think my favorite thing in the world is people will watch a fight where somebody is high as a kite on drugs and with no fighting experience whatsoever, or having some fighting experience, some martial skill, but no idea that fighting someone that high on drugs is like fighting livestock, someone who's physically that they're that strong and they're not feeling pain. I mean, I've had a bull calf literally fling me into a barn wall before, and that's having fought somebody who was high on drugs. I now have that experience. We literally don't know what we don't know, but we can get this attitude that we do know and we don't have a clue. And we see this a lot. And so I'm going to put some feet on this and then come back and talk about it. So I had a gentleman tell me, this is a darn good one. He said he wanted to come out to the house and shoot. I've got a private range. And he had been in the military 30 years since he had trained in any way, shape, or form. And his particular branch of the military, they had him train on a revolver. That's how long ago, for a very specific role that he was doing. And he had no combat experience at all. Great guy, but he believed that he knew everything that there was to know and everything that he needed to know about shooting. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're at the top of the shooting game. There's always more to learn. And there's just deeper and deeper understandings of the fundamentals. And so he ended up, he came out to the house and he had a semi-automatic handgun. He had never shot one, per my understanding. based especially on what he did next. And so we loaded the magazine up, loads it in there, racks the slide. Anybody that's watched a movie can do that. And then he turns around and he drives his hand out and he wraps his thumb over thumb where the slide was going to kiss the top of his thumb and probably take a pound of flesh. And I was like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And he's like, I'm going to shoot. And I said, right, but can I show you something? And so we took the gun apart in the sense that I've taken the round out, taken the mag out, locked the slide back, and I showed him this was going to hit the back of your thumb. He didn't know what he didn't know. We all have to start somewhere, and that comes from humility. We need to gut check ourselves and go, okay, what's my mindset? Do I have a teachable mindset? And then he proceeded, once the weapon was back together and aimed in a safe direction, he proceeded to just sprinkle the target. 15 rounds all over this silhouette target. And then he said, because he didn't know what he didn't know, he said, well, it doesn't get any better than that. I haven't shot in 30 years and I never missed. And I glanced at him and I thought, this poor guy literally doesn't know what he doesn't know. And that's Dunning Kruger. And there is an arrogance that can come from that. There's confidence from knowledge, but that confidence from knowledge is oftentimes very humble. And some of the most amazing instructors I know are incredibly humble people. They know that bullets go both ways. And you could be, as my friend Alvin Bowen with Tri-Point Tactical says, a double dip ninja, and you could still get hit. Battle of Mogadishu, the Mogadishu Mile, Black Hawk Down, whatever you want to call that situation. We lost a Delta Force operator because an incoming round killed him. I mean, he was doing everything right, and the likelihood he was actually killed by a teenager. Richard the Lionhearted was felled by a crossbow bolt. He was an incredible physical specimen. He was an incredible warrior. Not a terribly great king, but an incredible warrior. And he was felled by a crossbow bolt to the neck or face, and was felled by a teenager. And bullets go both ways. Humility is very important. And so this individual just didn't know what he didn't know. And he had a false sense of security based on that. So I glanced at him, and I had not loaded my handgun up with FMJ, full metal jacket rounds. And so I thought, this is worth burning 3 federal HST rounds, hollow points. And so I drew. We both have our eye pro and ear pro. We're standing in a safe position. And there's a little mini target in the top corner of this large paper target. And at 21 feet, I probably could have covered my group with a quarter. I owe an incredible debt to the instructors who have leveled me up to be able to shoot like that. Now, there are people that I shoot next to that make me look like I'm an incompetent goober because they're so good. We should surround ourselves with people who are ahead of us on the journey and and eventually there'll be people that are behind us on the journey. We will learn a lot of things, and we've got to be careful of saying things with absolute certainty. And so this guy looked at me and he's like, holy cow. He's like, I can't believe you shot like that. He's like, that's ridiculous. How often do you shoot? And I said, well, this is my pool table. This is what I do for fun. Like some people play billiards, some people, whatever. This is my hobby, but it's my hobby with a purpose. And I've got a new optic that just came in yesterday, and I'm going to be putting it on a carbine today and sighting it in. We should constantly be learning and constantly be adapting, constantly being deliberately moving forward. And this guy had not only plateaued, but the training he had received was not only 30 years out of date, it was subpar even for that era. And because of institutional inbreeding, his particular section of the military, and I have veteran friends, I chaplain guys in the military, I tend to collect very dangerous friends, not even really by design. And they're very, very, very good, godly men that are some of the nicest, most dangerous men you'll ever meet. And they are very high speed. But this guy was his little section of the military, what he was taught, and he thought they were hot stuff. Not so much. And he had no reference for that. And I'll tell one on me. I was the best shot in my neighborhood, up and down my valley, of my friends, of my family. I was just the best shot. But I'd never done any moving and shooting. I'd never done any tactical reloads. I'd never trained to clear malfunctions. I didn't really understand concealment, covering concealment. And I was standing talking to a guy. He'd come out to the house to do some maintenance and stuff on some stuff at the house. And he's like, hey, do you like to shoot? And so, I grabbed my Glock, he grabbed his, and I shot and never missed at about 35, 40 feet. And then he shot, and his group was so much tighter, and I was immediately humbled. I was like, oh man, I don't know what I don't know. And I've since shot next to ex-military, current and former contractors, some people that are very, very high speed, some really high speed instructors. And a lot of times the people at the best part of their game, and talk to Navy SEALs, talk to Green Berets, people at the very top of their game, they actually learn from people who aren't military. Because a lot of times the people that do really, really, really well in those environments, those experts, that mountain climbing expert, that handgun expert, that's all they know. Not all they know, but that's where they really shine. And you see a lot of that in really high speed SF, SOF situations where people develop specialities. They get really good at particular things. And they will tell you when they really want to know something really well, a lot of times they go outside the military to learn it. Now there's applications for that and all that stuff, but they will go learn from an expert that's what they do. And so I think Dunning Kruger, I think, is a thing that impacts men at least as much as it does women, and I would argue more, because a lot of times women have more of a humility when it comes to learning hand-to-hand skills. They have more of a humility when it comes to learning firearm skills. And we all assume, and this is what's sad about pride, we assume we're better at something than we are. And if we become unteachable, we literally can't learn. We don't know what we don't know. And have you ever tried to tell somebody something that they don't know anything about it, but they think they know everything? And that, again, back to armchair quarterbacking, whether it's sports, we all can be guilty of this. And I've looked at situations even recently that are rampant in social media. I have an opinion about them that is completely different from other people. And I even got bored and watched a couple of videos where some people who are experts in body language and certain things evaluated this situation. And what they came away with was completely different than what I came away with. And I was like, I'm going to have to think about that and ponder on it, because they are a subject matter expert. It doesn't mean they're always right, but it means they are a subject matter expert. And so those are a couple applications for Dunning Kruger. And I'm going to tell myself a little bit. I remember way back in the day, and there's other biases that these can come from, but I remember back in the day, I had heard things and I thought I had learned things. Now, hearing something and learning something is two different things. What I mean by that is you can hear something from someone who says it with absolute certainty. And that's one of the things that is oftentimes an earmark of someone who actually doesn't know what they're talking about, is if they won't say, I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe I could be wrong, based on my experience. If they are going to say something with absolute certainty, the bias that they have there could be a set of blinders, and the lens that they look at the world through could be a huge problem. There's a great application for this. So I'm a camera guy. You can have ND filters. You can have something that is a lens that goes over your lens that filters the way light comes into your camera, and it actually dramatically impacts the picture that you take ultimately. I love photography. For those of you who are watching this episode rather than listening to it, I'd like to apologize if you're watching it instead of listening to it, because you got to look at me. But over here I have a picture, and it's a leaf floating in a stream. I'll get my hand over here, and there's reflections on top of the water. I didn't put a filter on the top of my lens that could have filtered that out. I wanted the reflections, so when I had that printed, there's actually reflections over the top of the water. And I like that. That's something that I like about photography. I like to take a picture of what's actually there. And but we can look at life through a lens, through a filter, through a set of rose-colored glasses, however we want to look at it, and we really actually don't know what we're talking about, or we're just wrong about a particular aspect, and we've got to remain teachable. So telling on myself a little bit, I remember back in the day that I fell for a lot of the caliber wars baloney, and I thought that maybe this round was better than that round. And then after having educated myself for a decade, I'm not going to stand in front of your 25 or your 32 caliber gun. I'm not going to stand in front of your 22 caliber gun. I'm not going to carry one of those for self-defense, but I'm not going to stand in front of it and let you shoot me. But I've come to realize that, like, between the main calibers that are carried by people, the most common calibers, there is about a 2 to 5% difference in performance inside the human body. So, 940, 45, 357 SIG, in that little category there that are the most common, like, duty carry guns, 45 auto and everything in that, there's about a 2 to 5% difference in performance. And we can get mad. And this is one of the definite signs of Dunning Kruger. People are like, the 45 auto is God's round. And I'm going to step on some toes. we don't know what we don't know. And after I had studied ballistics and really drank from a lot of fountains on the topic and realized if somebody's not trying to sell you something, gotta watch for that. And if somebody is willing to actually, like, they're breaking stuff down and talking to you about stuff, then you stop and go, oh, wait a minute. What they're doing and what they're saying, they're actually explaining this. The difference between how a pistol cartridge performs inside of a human body varies massively. And it makes a lot of sense. And so that's the thing we can fall into. I fell into it, stopping power and all this stuff. People that I loved and people that I respected had said things that they had heard regurgitated from other people. So we can get in these echo chambers where this gun is the best gun to carry, this round is the best round to carry. Based on what? Based on what actual evidence? This carry style, this martial art, this whatever. We can get so hung up on these things, and people will tout stuff that well, this branch of the military does this, so that's obviously the way to do it. Right, but within their lane, they're trained to do a specific thing. So they carry a specific weapon, or they can carry a specific whatever, because in their lane, in the environment that they're trained to operate in, that is optimal, or that contractor won the bidding, and that's why they carry that weapon. A lot of times you'll talk to guys that have been through the military, they're like, the weapon systems that we actually used, we tested better systems, but the contractor that won was the one that gave them the military the best price. So we don't know what we don't know. I've had guys tell me, well, I carry this gun because that's what they carry in the military, so obviously it's the best. No, that's the contractor that won the bid. Actually, there were two other weapons that performed better, that had fewer stoppages, that lasted longer, that didn't win the bidding because they were more expensive. Oh, we just don't know what we don't know. And we can get these biases and things that can, and this is tough because it hits us all where we live. And I have to be careful because I'm a naturally confident person. And so I have caught myself before believing something and then saying it. And this is a hallmark of Dunning Kruger, of pride, with absolute certainty, instead of saying, this is what I carry now. This is where I've come to now. I've come down this journey. And if we catch ourselves sugarcoating our stories, if we catch ourselves sugarcoating our past and saying, well, I do this because of this, this is the best way to do because of, we're almost like creating disciples after ourselves. And so I have friends that carry what I carry and the rounds I carry and the type of holster I carry because they're not willing to do the research for themselves. That's fine. They ask me for recommendations. I appreciate that. I give them recommendations, but I'll also be willing to come back later. And this is a sign of humility, and it's a journey that I'm on, is I've realized there's better. Now, the whole environment that we're talking about changes constantly. Better de-escalation training is coming out. Better medical training is coming out. Stop the bleed, recognizing signs of heart attack and stroke and diabetic whatever, and recognizing traumatic brain injuries, and you're dealing with somebody that's volatile, and that's the sign of a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, or hand-to-hand tactics, or firearms. Like, literally, there have been weapons. I'll give you a great example. I do executive protection, and a long time ago, I do executive protection for ministries. And I have never done it for money, although that would be cool. And so I had gotten a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 because it was the best of what was available to put in the bag on a budget. And it flipped over the top, and it was hard to put an optic, and people were actually having to build stuff around the weapons platform to make it work, and it was suboptimal. And so you literally had to take the gun out of your bag, snap it forward, chamber around, and then go. The thing I liked about it is I carry a Glock, and we can come back to that later because I think that's a very telling story on myself. But I could get a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 that would take Glock mags, and I joke that one of my favorite phrases in the world is "it takes Glock mags," and because I can carry one type of magazine and one type of ammo, and with a carbine that takes Glock mags, I can get in a stand-up fight with a rifle. Now, in my application, because God forbid I ever have to use it, but if I pull that thing out of my bag and I have to go to town, it's a delaying action. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to put enough rounds downrange to make the bad guy want to break contact so we can get out of there. I'm not there to win the engagement. I'm there to get my people to safety. And so whereas a military application would be a higher caliber with better penetration, 5.56, 308, name a Creedmoor, whatever, that is a different application. I'm not storming a building and taking the building, with grenades. I'm fighting a delaying action. I'm trying to break contact, and I need to be able to get in a stand-up fight with a weapons platform that's portable, that is not going to weigh a huge amount, and gives me some ability to throw some rounds back in an environment that is concealable. So started out with the Kel-Tec Sub 2000. It was awful, and I'm not downplaying the gun. It was the best thing available at the time. Now moving forward, where I'm at right now for my EP gun, as I call it, it's a Ruger PC Charger. Now, love it or hate it, but here's what I like about it. It takes Glock mags. I can put an arm brace on it, and I've got a muzzle brake. Actually, that optic that came in is for it. I'm upgrading my optic on it, and it takes Glock mags. I've switched out the insert for the magwell, and it actually takes my Glock mags now. It'll take Ruger or Glock mags, and I can actually have it ready to go, mag in something. I could put the mag in the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, but I had to top fold it out. With this, I can actually bring it up and chamber around and shoot it folded. I've got the brace folding around the side, and there's better application for this. There's sling mounts built onto this thing, so we've moved forward and up. Now, if you have a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 and you're happy with it, and it's your farm gun, your range gun, or your truck gun, or whatever, great, stay where you're at. But I needed speed and performance, lightweight now. That technology has moved forward, and it has Picatinny rails, which means I can put whatever gingerbread on this thing that I want. And that's really important. That's one of those things that being able to upgrade, it's got a light. I've actually got a green laser on it, not because I'm high speed and cool, but because literally in an environment where I have to point shoot, I can come up and press that in, and that green laser can hit a target. I pray I never have to use it. But I've literally been in situations where, as a chaplain, there's been a threat against one of my officers. I've had a chief call me and say, "Hey, I know you'll do it. If you're available, would you come out and ride with one of my cops? Somebody's threatened to kill him, and he's understandably nervous." And those departments don't have a budget for long guns. And so I'll ask the officer, "Hey, do you want this in your vehicle? Something happens, I can hand it to you." And guess what they carry? Dominant in the law enforcement environment is Glocks. And so that weapon has been along for the ride. And if the officer needed to jump up and have something that he could get in a stand-up fight with a rifle with, and at least be able to hold his own, then he had it. And so if I had been, and this is where we can get so biased about things, and it's a pride thing instead of a humility thing. If I had been unwilling to learn, I would not have upgraded. Now, somebody else is going to come out with a better platform at some point. I would really love to see some company come out with a weapons platform that would be 9, 40, 45 interchangeable, where it had the different platform, but you could put a whole bunch of different handgun magazines in it, i.e. you have a police department that they all carry SIG, and you take the magwell insert out and put that in there. There's always room to improve. Better rifling. Maybe somebody's going to come out with a better barrel. Whatever. It's always going to move forward. Now, I'm using a weapons application just because that's where I live. The world I'm in. I'm next to cops all the time. I do executive protection for ministries, and I do armed security for churches. And so, if we are not humble about it, though, we can become so biased that we're not willing to learn and not willing to move forward. And I actually, like I said, I had tried 2 Kel-Tec Sub 2000s, and I got rid of those. And because I had found better. I've also gone through different handgun platforms. So I'm gonna tell something on myself here, but I think this is another thing that can be really applicable. When we don't know something, we can make these assumptions. So we go to people in our circle, which can be an echo chamber, and we can say, "Well, what do you carry?" Okay, I'm going to carry that. Not every firearm is suitable for every person. There's different hand sizes. I've got a friend that's a little bitty guy. He's like 5'2", an incredible shot. And he carries, I forget the make and model. It's not an H&K. It'll come to me. It's a I think it's a Beretta, but it's got a grip that fits his hand really, really well. It does not fit my hand. I don't have giant hands, but I don't have tiny hands. And he's just a small frame guy. He's also an incredible shot with a rifle or a handgun, and he's a mixed martial artist, and he'll tear you up. Yeah, and he's a godly man. That said, if I was to have a bias that, well, the only weapon to carry is a Glock. Now, I'm a Glock guy, you know. Why did I choose a Glock? Are there better triggers? Yes. Now, again, think about this from a bias standpoint. We can be so biased about something that we're not listening. So, are there better triggers than my Glock? Yes, significantly. Are there better grips? Are there better grip angles? Are there possibly better magazines? Yeah. Are there better sights? Oh yes, absolutely. The first thing I do on my Glocks is take the built-in factory sights, or the factory sights that come with it, and I change them out for night sights. And there's reasons for that. There are different companies that have taken and moved ahead in certain areas. On the whole, there's two reasons that I choose to continue to carry it. Well, three technically. I've trained on that platform for a really, really long time. And I have to be willing, and this is where I keep my mindset, is I have to be willing to change and adapt. Most of my cops, reason two, carry Glocks, which means my 9mm Glock mags, if I'm not breathing anymore, or I can toss them a magazine, they can either take the magazines off my body, or they can, or I can toss them one in a situation where they've run out of ammo. So that's the second reason. And thirdly is a Glock is like the AK-47 of handguns. It runs, and I've torture tested mine. I remember some guy was telling me about how Glocks jam all that. He didn't know what he didn't know, how they jam all the time, and how they're just a pathetic gun. And I'm like, have you ever trained with them? Or no. And all he had happened was some guy told him this. He was like, Glocks are garbage and they always jam. And I'm like, have you actually ever trained on them? Because if you've actually trained on them, you would know that they rarely malfunction, and if they do, it's almost always ammunition. And I've had my Glocks recover from situations where I've had my Glock lock up because of how terrible the ammunition was. I managed to get the mag out, clear the malfunction, check it over, and go right back to town, next to a much more finicky firearms platform. So I choose based on the amount of time I've trained with them, based on their reliability, because I need it to go bang, and based on the fact that the guys that I'm next to are probably carrying a Glock. Even on the executive protection details that I do, if I get pulled into a team where they're like, hey, we got a situation and we need you to come out and if you're available, come join the team, almost everybody on that team is carrying one, which means we have mag interchangeability. So, but again, are there better triggers? Absolutely. Are there better barrels? Are there better mags? Yeah. But on the whole, it works really great for me. What you carry for you based on your physical size, your grip strength, on how you can work the slide, on the caliber that you can handle and operate, that's up to you. But we can get into these biases if we're not careful. I remember talking to a guy that he's one of the heavy hitters on his church's security team, and his information that he's trained on is way out of date. And so he's way too confident based on the amount of training he actually has. And he was telling me that he had this snapped up shirt that he could rip open, and he reaches into a t-shirt and slides over and grabs his weapon is free floating in this little pocket that's in this skin tight t-shirt. So he's going to rip his shirt open. He's going to slide his hand magically into that pocket. The firearm's going to be perfectly oriented, even though it's not really retained really. It's going to move some. Slide his hand in there, and then he's going to pull it out and not hang it up at all. And then he's going to defeat the bad guy. I said, well, okay, I'm not going to tell you where to carry, but I said, weapons retention is a huge thing. And I said, I prefer to carry at the waist, and here's the reasons. And he wasn't hearing it. I said, that's fine. Can I show you something? He's like, sure. This is where knowledge can beget humility, which defeats pride, which is what the Dunning Kruger effect is it's pride in ignorance, pride in bias. And so I said, reach up like pop the snaps on your shirt, reach up, get your finger Glock ready, and stick it up underneath your armpit and act like you're going to draw. And so when he did, I reached out and I gripped his elbow. And so he couldn't get his gun out of the holster. If weapons retention is a huge thing, and if my weapon's trapped in the holster and I can't get it out to the fight, I've got a real problem. And I've had instructors who've humbled me by saying, hey, be careful not to let somebody get that close to you. And I look at him, and I had a guy, he reached out and grabbed my lapels and stuck both of his thumbs in my windpipe that fast. Keep that distance. It was humbling. I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought I could react it. You got to keep a reactionary gap because action always beats reaction. I didn't even see it coming because he moved so fast and it had me, didn't hurt me. I had another instructor who was talking about reactionary gaps, and he's like, Buckner, come here. Guy's a scary dude. He's a good man. He's a scary dude, and scary fast and scary good with his hands. And so I get up and I walk up there, and he's like, you got to be careful. And he's talking about reactionary gaps where somebody might do this. And he turns around and hits me in the windpipe. And I was going to die of a combination, I thought at the time, of a combination of asphyxiation and embarrassment, because all I could think is this guy just killed me with his finger, and because I couldn't breathe. I was humbled by it completely, and realized by painful example that you've got to keep a reactionary gap, that you've got to be careful in these situations. That is knowledge begets humility. And like I said, I've shot next to guys that have helped me to realize, oh crud. And I've had cop buddies come back from training and go, that guy is unbelievable. And, here I am, and I thought I was pretty high speed, and I've got some pretty high speed cop buddies, but I've had guys that they go to training with me and they're like, holy cow, that guy is fast. And they're like, man, I wouldn't want to face him in a gun battle. But then that should make us stop and go, okay, now what do I do about that? And so Dunning Kruger is this idea that, and there's all these charts and diagrams and stuff you can see out there on the internet. At the very beginning of the charts, they talk about how you know almost nothing about the topic, but you think you know a lot. And so your confidence level is really, really high. And this describes a lot of men in general. We think we're better husbands. We think we're better fathers. We think that we name a topic. We think we're better shots. We think we can fight better. We think we're better with money than the average person. We think we're better drivers than the average person. And in some cases, like 80% of our society thinks they're better than average at something, which statistically is literally impossible. Go out there and watch it. There's 100 videos on the topic. And we're probably not. And what's interesting is when we start to learn, the me from 18 years ago that married my wife was a prideful, arrogant individual. And I thought I knew a lot more about a lot of topics than I did at pride of youth at that point. And I've come to realize over time being married that with humility, there's a lot of things that I have a phenomenally better understanding of today than I did then. But I'm a lot better at it, but I'm a lot less, I don't want to say arrogant, because in some cases I was just confident in those skill sets, but I was wrong. And so I didn't know what I didn't know. So I'm a better husband. I'm not a perfect husband. I'm a better father. I'm a better businessman. I'm better with money. I know more about God. I'm closer to God in my relationship with God, and that takes effort and continuing down that road. But I've come to realize that the guy 18 years ago, I could go back and actually take him to task on some things that I just thought were good or normal, or that's the way things worked. And that's learning that comes with age. But I've come to realize I didn't know what I didn't know. Now, because I've educated myself, comes the humility. And humility is really important because you could be a 5th degree black belt. I have a very good friend that's a 5th degree black belt, and he's like, and he'll tear you up, but he's like, I have to stay fit or it doesn't work, because I get gassed easy if I'm not fit. So he knows that's a challenge, but he's also like, I've also come to realize that a guy with a gun can shoot me before I can ever reach him. And all of my training is not going to stop that bullet because he has significant hand-to-hand training. And then one day I do business with this guy. A man came in the door and they visited and the guy left, and he goes, that guy could beat me like a drum. Now this is a 5th degree black belt. Talk about humility. He goes, that guy was ahead of me, and he's like three full belts, like black belt levels above me. And he's like, he is so fast and he is so skilled. And here's this guy, my buddy's a 5th degree black belt. He could beat 4 of me to a pulp. And he's like, this guy would beat me like a drum. The longer he's learned And I've had several friends tell me this. They're like, when I got my first degree black belt, up until that point, I thought I was a bad dude. And then as they were belting me, and I've used this story many times because it's so pertinent to me, it really makes me think about humility. He said, as I'm being belted by, third degree, fifth degree, seventh degree black belts, I'm looking around the room realizing I'm just beginning to understand what it is I don't know. We see this a lot. Going back to the firearms thing, I've literally talked to guys that they're like, well, I've got all these weapons, and if something really bad happens, and fill in the blank, whether it's a Red Dawn scenario, whether it's some post-apocalyptic thing, whether they're defending their family in a parking lot or stopping a home invasion, their mindset is, I have this weapon, and I'll just magically know what to do with it when the time comes. No, you won't. That is facts, not an evidence. And you can go watch John Correa with Active Self-Protection, and they've got hundreds and hundreds of videos of people failing to perform under stress. And if you'd ask those guys going in there, they think that they are 5,000% more effective in a physical altercation than they really are. And I'll give you a great example. One of the officers that is very, very close to me had learned basic hand-to-hand defensive tactics in the academy. He had done some DT work after that, some defensive tactics work after that. Then he got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has great application in law enforcement. And it's great if you're fighting one person. If someone's attacking you and it's one person. If it's 5-on-1, you probably want to stay on your feet. You probably need to keep your stand-up game going. But as he began to train in this, a guy started to fight him, and he literally, guy's down, ends up putting him in handcuffs. And he's like, I wish I could go back and redo. I wish I had a mulligan for some of the altercations I was in early in my career. He's like, because I could have taken those people down that fast. He didn't know what he didn't know. And he's finding great application for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And there's humility that comes with that knowledge, but there's also a humble confidence, not arrogance, not pride. There's a humble confidence where you can look at somebody and go, look, this is a really bad idea. And that humble confidence speaks volumes. So going back to Dunning Kruger, I made some notes off here to the side, so you'll see me, if you're watching this, you'll see me glance over to it. But there's some verses that I think are very applicable to this. So Proverbs 26:12, do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them. Wise in our own eyes in the application of Dunning Kruger is, I think I know something based on no actual evidence. And that's scary. And so there's a couple of other verses. I just made notes on them. Pride goes before a fall. God humbles the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I would much rather humble myself and learn than have God humble me or have an experience humble me. And I have a friend that ended up in a physical altercation. He was very, very out of shape, and he was very, very overweight. And he said, this guy beat me like a drum. Like, this guy really hurt me. And I forget how he worded it, but he said, this guy really hurt me. He said, I'm on my hands and knees and I'm wheezing. And he said, I defeated myself. I was completely gassed. I couldn't breathe. He said, because I was completely out of shape and I was morbidly obese. And he said, the guy stopped and stood over me. And he said, the guy was just hitting me and there was nothing I could do. He said, I was fighting to breathe. I couldn't even fight him. And he said, the guy stopped and looked at me and said, I could kill you right now. And turned around and walked off. And he said, that's what made me start really seriously looking at, man, I'm out of shape. And he was young enough to be able to do something about it. He learned the hard way and could have been killed. He learned the hard way that the bad guy gets a vote. He learned the hard way that he didn't know what he thought he knew. He thought he was okay, or was ignoring truths. And that's one of the things about pride is pride will oftentimes lead us to ignore truths. And so, like, I have a friend that he was in a cargo pocket on the side of his pants. He was carrying a handgun, unchambered, which is probably a good way to do that if you're going to carry it in your cargo pocket, no holster. And it was just easier for him to carry it that way. And he informed me that he would be able to draw and have plenty of time before someone attacked him. And I was trying to tell him, look, somebody's not going to call you out to a high noon shootout. Somebody's not going to say, okay, Paul, so can you pencil me in for Thursday about 2? I think I'm going to try to mug you. That's not how that works. And the bad guy gets to pick the time and the place of the attack, the weapon, the angle of attack, and whatever distractions they try to use to get close to us. And so my son was next to me at the time, and he glanced over, and I'm talking to my friend, and We served in a security capacity together. We're still friends. And I said, can I show you something? And he's like, sure. And so I reached around, and he was not watching my body language. And I pulled a Sharpie. I ironically had a Sharpie in my back pocket, closed, and I pulled it like this, and I stepped into him, and I was inside of his reactionary gap because we're friends and he trusts me. And so I took it and I just touched his chest, and I just basically sewing machined, but gently. It didn't hurt him. I just went up his chest. He's like, what the heck? And I said, that's the reality of a knife attack. And I had come up a little bit in some traditional martial arts. I never really belted out. I'm not Kung Fu Panda. But we had these Okinawan knife defense and all these different things that we had been taught. When a bad guy's coming at you doing a figure eight, or they're doing an X and they're doing this and they have some experience, the way they hold their weapon and move, it's really hard to take that weapon away from somebody. You want to keep that reactionary distance and fight dirty. Do whatever you can. Run like heck. Do whatever you can to earn that space and get away, or create that gap and earn your draw and put rounds in them. I thought, because I had never done force on force training, I had never done weapons retention training, I had never moved and shot. I thought I actually had this on lockdown. I thought I knew what I was doing. And as I began to train, it really humbled me, because I looked around and there were people at every level of the game training beside me. And training is a great way to test your skills. It's a great way to level up your skills, but then to go back and retake that class is a great way to see how you have done. The sad thing is, I'm probably and this is not bragging, this is sad, I'm probably in the top 1% of shooters in the nation. And what I mean by that is, most people don't ever train. Most people don't carry all the time. Most people have never moved in a shot, and they've never gone through this training. I'm nowhere near where I need to be. So that's really actually kind of scary from a self-defender standpoint. And if you want to talk about Red Dawn, defending a nation against a foreign invasion and doing guerrilla warfare, most people would not survive contact with the enemy, but they think they would. And that is probably one of the most blatant examples of that, is when somebody is severely out of shape, they do no cardio, they've never trained with their weapons platform. I know guys that have armor, rifles, all this gear, and they think they're just going to strap this stuff on and go to war, and suddenly they're Audie Murphy. No, that is probably one of the most in-your-face examples of Dunning Kruger, of pride, and how it can lead to a fall. Being able to take criticism is an enormous way for us to realize that we've got to remember we're human, but to realize that we're actually teachable. I found myself in a situation recently with a young friend that I mentor, and I was trying to do something. It's in a business environment, and I didn't handle it right. I was making a really good point, but I got really frustrated with him, and I said something I shouldn't have. We've since talked, we've worked it out. I'm like, look, I was trying to make a point, but I really delivered it poorly, and I'm sorry. Pride goeth before a fall. And so pride is literally our worst enemy. And pride will get us killed. I remember Carl Chin talking about at the Colorado Springs, Colorado shooting. Go back and read his book, When Evil Invades the Sanctuary. But a guy ran up, Carl had gotten to cover and was assessing his situation and was trying to engage the shooter that was there, and had pronounced that Christians, this is your Columbine, and had a long gun and was prepared to do battle. As he was trying to effect an ambush, a guy ran up and was like, well, if you're not going to go fight him, give me your gun. He'd have been dead in 2 seconds. If he would have taken Carl's gun and run, and if I remember the story right, the guy stepped out and a couple incoming rounds came up, and I think some spalling, if you will, some frag came off of the column that Carl was behind, and the guy ran. The guy's fortunate to be alive. The guy had a lot of bravado, and I love his heart to feel like he needed to jump in, but what he didn't have was any wisdom and any training. And so our lack of training and our pride can literally get us or other people killed. This is why we need to be humble about this. And we need to be, and this is what training does for us, we need to be able to look critically at our skill sets. And I liken it to making 2% shifts. Once we've trained for a while, it goes from, we really broaden the scope of what we know, And our arrogance goes way down, our humility comes way up, and we have this quiet confidence that comes in there to go, I'm I'm decent, I'm competent. But then we keep making these 2% shifts. I recently changed one of the mags that I carry, and a lot of the departments that I work next to, they are shifting from 15 round magazines, weapons that take 15 round magazines, to weapons that take 17 round magazines. And so as they're doing this, if I am to take one of my backup mags and toss it to an officer, if I toss him a 15 round magazine, it'll fall right out of his gun that's designed to take a 17 round mag. And so both of my backup magazines that I carry now are 17 rounders. It doesn't take up that much more space. We need to be willing to look at things and ask ourselves, when was the last time I trained on this topic? If never, we need to train. And to realize that, like I was talking to a friend of mine recently, the military instills a sense of pride in service and that we're the best of the best. So that's good in a martial sense going into combat, to have that confidence in that. But then to come out the other side and to assume that half a day's training on a handgun, if that's what you got in your branch of the military, that's going to make you competent as a self-defender carrying concealed, those two are not equal. And if a lot of the guys that I have worked closely with, they told me the best firearms training I actually got was outside of the military. They're like, I could shoot really well with a carbine. I could shoot a machine gun or a rocket launcher or drive a tank. But the best firearms training I got with a handgun, which is what they're carrying for self-defense as a private citizen, was actually outside the military. Why? Well, you don't win wars with handguns. We didn't pull up to enemy coastlines and level off, an entire side of a battleship that was full of 45 auto handguns and just fire them inland. It doesn't work that way. And you carry a handgun in the military really as a last ditch defense. And if you're down to your handgun, unless you're maybe Delta and you train primarily on handguns because of moving in tight spaces, or you're a federal air marshal or whatever, some type of high-speed MOS where you're doing executive protection for dignitaries overseas, you probably don't spend a lot of time on handgun training. You need that as a private citizen, though. And so that's where we need to be able to take a step back. And I've had a lot of friends, law enforcement and military, go into training with a private instructor and go, whoa, I just leveled up. Like, why don't they teach us this stuff? Well, there's not a huge application for that training. A lot of police officers don't carry concealed. A lot of our military don't carry concealed. There's no application for it. So why would they train you and fill your head with something that you don't need? As a private citizen, you do need it. And so those biases can really get us in trouble. So we need to be able to take a step back and really go, am I humble? Wisdom comes from that kind of training in this application, and realizing that I'll give you a great example. I had a guy tell me, he's like, well, I don't need a tourniquet, I wear a belt. Okay, I might step on some toes here, but there was a guy that was hiking not that long ago, and something happened, and I believe he severed his femoral, or at least sliced it pretty deeply. And he pulled his belt off because he didn't have any medical with him, slid it up, cinched it back, and was holding pressure, which was working. It was pretty much occluding the blood flow. Except it was, I may have used that phrase incorrectly, but anyway, he'd actually stemmed the blood flow. And then the shock got to him and he began to pass out. And when he passed out, they found him dead because he sanguinated. He bled to death. So his body relaxed when he passed out. And as he went limp, the belt loosened and the blood flowed freely and he died. And we may be, a minute, 90 seconds out from dying at that point. And so not being willing to carry, I'll give you another one. I was talking to a police officer that his department at the time did not require you to carry a tourniquet. And that's old school, like almost every police department does now. But he's like, that's silly. He's like, I've got a med kit in my car, and he's like, it's full blowout kit. He's like, I've got the chest seals and compressed gauze, and I've got the tourniquet in there. And I was trying to help him to understand that he really didn't know what he didn't know. He wasn't thinking about it. He only had the training that his department had been able to fund him with. And so I have found over the years that the forehead is often pretty hard to get through. People are not listening. And so I try to go around the back door and see if the back door is open. And so I said, so let's say that you are hurt. I said, are you always driving your car? And he's like, well, no. I said, so you're out of your car quite a bit? And he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so let's say You're out of your car. I said, and you're shot. I said, do you know where you're going to be 100% of the time when you face an injury or a severe blood loss injury, or someone else does? And he goes, where? And I said, right there. He's like, oh, well, when you put it that way. And that is, to me, is a way that I've helped people to understand that oftentimes we just don't know what we don't know. And I remember, and I handled this very poorly years ago, there was a conversation about dealing with headshots and hostage situations. And at first blush, if somebody says, well, I would want a 12 gauge shotgun for that application, I was like, what? And I was like, that's ridiculous, because, you're shooting a pattern and you could literally kill the hostage. And the guy is like, have you ever patterned a shotgun? Honestly, no. And he's like, have you ever been through a defensive tactics class with a shotgun, trained up to the level that you did room clearing with a shotgun? And I'm like, no. And he's like, at the ranges that we're talking about, the pattern would be about this wide. And he was, and I had actually gotten fairly hostile with the guy. It was a long time ago, because I thought he was stupid based on what I thought was evidence. And I'd shot shotguns and different things like this. And I was just thinking of a shotgun as being a terrible weapon to room clear with, or not so much room clear with, but to deal with a hostage situation. I have never trained defensive tactics or room clearing with a shotgun, but I have talked to guys who have, and they've laid some knowledge on me, and they've humbled me to say, I hate to tell you this, bro, he was actually right. There's actually application where a shotgun is superior in an environment to a rifle. And, I understand that from a home defense standpoint, but I wouldn't have trusted, and here's the important part, based on my skills and experience and training, I wouldn't have trusted that platform. And I still wouldn't, because guess what I haven't done? I've trained with a carbine, but I've not trained with a shotgun. So knowing your weapon, having training, and having actually great application for that training, you might find yourself in a situation where it is a superior platform. And, you poke holes in people with rifles, and you blow chunks out of them with shotguns. And that's an old, that came off of Thunder Ranch. That's one of Clint's isms, but, and probably predates him. We can find ourselves in these situations where our pride and arrogance get in the way. And I'm about to land the plane. I'm just about out of ammo on this, but I think it's something we really need to be able to take a step back. And so the answer to this is training, which humbles us, which actually gives us real confidence. And I found myself in situations where, more than once, innumerable times, because of doing executive protection in some high-risk environments, because of writing with police departments and having situations where officers were in danger and needed backup and didn't have it, and they were like, grabbing the chaplain because they know the chaplain will roll with them, or even just in defending loved ones or myself. I've been in some weird situations for a guy who doesn't go to bars and nightclubs and garbage like that, who doesn't drink and doesn't go to wild parties, and I don't go stupid places with stupid people and do stupid things. The Lord has put me in a lot of situations where those skill sets have paid off, and I've been able to look at somebody. I remember a guy thinking he was going to mug my wife and I knew at the range he was at, he couldn't reach me, but I could reach him with my high-speed lead dispensing device. And I knew I could prevail, but there was no need, there was no bravado. And that's one of the things about that, was I knew what the outcome was going to be. He had no backup. I'd already looked around, and I didn't engage this guy. There was nothing to prove. There was no pride in it. I knew what was going to happen. I looked at the guy, we made eye contact, and I went like this, and he pointed at me like, "Thank you, sir," and turned around and walked away. What I was saying was, I see you, I know what you're up to, and you don't want to do this. And that's the thing about actual knowledge, is insecurities are loud. And actual experience and knowledge and training is a lot quieter. I remember being in a situation, I've talked about it before, but I was doing security for a rally, and it was a ministry-based situation, but there was a very credible threat that it was all but absolutely crystal clear that he had just armed himself and was preparing for a drive-by. And out of 200 people there, almost everybody was not up to the challenge. And I heard all of the things that are Dunning Kruger, pride, all of that. And one guy was like, well, I'm not worried about it. He's like, my gun's in my truck, a couple hundred yards away, 150, 200 yards away. And then you see it dawn on him like, oh, wait, that's like saying, I'm not worried about a home invader. That door's locked for their protection. Well, okay, but do you have to go to your safe and get your gun and then load your gun and then come out and engage them? Because you're probably going to lose that gun battle. They're going to beat you to death with a baseball bat or stab you to death with a knife. They're going to shoot you before you can get to your weapon. I'm the kind of guy, my holster is, my weapon's just a hair out of reach for me to reach it here, but I carry appendix, I carry chambered, I've got a spare mag on it, and then there's a spare mag in my pocket. And I'm able to, I can keep it in the holster, I can lay it down next to me, and if my wife and I are watching TV, it's a matter of grabbing the holster, ripping the gun off the holster, and then I can point it at that fatal funnel that is the door or the window or whatever that the bad guy would try to climb through. It's one thing to have a prideful mindset and think we know something, and then we can be terribly humbled, or it's another thing to have actual competent skill sets. And that's what really concerns me, and I want to save us that heartache, because the last thing I want to do is go for my weapon in a defensive situation, have somebody disarm me, shoot me with it, and then as I bleed to death, watch them hurt people that I love. And I remember talking to a guy that he was carrying smaller back where he couldn't see. He was open carrying, and I actually guarded him. He was security for a concert, a Christian concert, and that he was there to protect it. And from the center of the crowd, watching the concert, not looking around at all, and based on the experience that I had gained, the training that I had, more specifically, I knew if I walked up and kidney punched that guy while he went, because you do that, you get kidney punched, and then you go, and then I could have taken his weapon, put it against the back of his head, pulled the trigger, and he'd have been dead if I was the bad guy. I literally guarded the guy that was guarding the concert. And that is one of those things that arrogance can get us. Oh man, it can write checks that our body and training and experience can't cash. And so training, I've made this note here at the bottom of my notes, training with competent instructors will give us a real test of our skills and help us to properly evaluate where we are and where we need to grow. So on that note, I'm going to pray this episode out. Lord God, I thank you for this. I thank you for training. Praise be to the Lord my God who trains my hands for war. I thank you for listening ears. I ask that you'd help this episode to reach the right ears. I give you this episode and I give you today in your son Jesus' name. Amen. God bless. This has been the Let's Talk About Church Safety and Security podcast. We hope this blessed you, and we encourage you to like and share this episode with your ministry team.